My name is Jill Coil, and welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce, where we talk the nitty-gritty aspects of divorce and help each other come through this not only surviving, but thriving. I'm a divorce attorney, and I'm interviewing other experts and people just like you who are going through or have been through a divorce, so you can have the latest and greatest information on all things before, during, and after divorce. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce. We are starting a little bit of a series that we're going to kind of do off and on to talk about more celebrity divorces and or issues that are in the news. And I'm really excited because I'm all about celebrity gossip. And so I always want to talk about it. And this is going to be kind of a new podcast that we'll just kind of throw in there that will be interesting, controversial, and fun. So today's guest is one of my very own. And when I say that, what I mean is she's coming straight from my law firm. As you guys know, I own one of the largest family law firms in the state. Coil Law, and Corttany Brooks is here with me today. Hi, Corttany.
Hi, Jill. Thanks so much for having me today.
Oh my gosh. So today we are talking about Britney Spears' conservatorship. And I'm really excited because I've been reading all about it because it just fascinates me. And I am totally team free Britney.
I am also team free Britney. So we are going to have a lot to talk about today.
A lot to talk about, but I want to introduce you guys to Corttany. Corttany actually joined my firm last summer. She actually moved here from being a deputy prosecutor in Indianapolis, Indiana. She had never lived in Utah. And her partner at the time, Gabe.
Yes.
Who is still here. They're still together. But he, I guess now you're technically fiancé.
Yes, we are getting married next year.
I know. I'm so excited. Anyway, he got a job here at the University of Utah, right? And so she, as a prosecutor in Indiana, was specializing in special victim cases with a primary specialization in domestic violence, which really, I guess, helped when she came and joined our firm. You were just able to kind of jump right in. You already kind of had that empathetic approach that we really strive at Coil Law. And she then just had to learn the law, and she has done just absolutely amazing. You were born and raised in Indiana, weren't you?
Yes, I was. So I was in Indianapolis up until coming to Utah essentially last year.
Yeah.
Just been here for 1 year now.
And you graduated with your bachelor's degree in journalism from Ohio University.
Yes.
And then you got your JD from Indiana University, Mauer. Is that how?
Yes, it's Mauer School of Law. It's in Bloomington, Indiana. So about an hour south of Indianapolis.
Amazing. And so she's now licensed in Indiana and Utah.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm so excited you're here, Corttany. Give somebody a little bit of fact about you so that they can feel like they get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, gosh. So I just recently got a puppy. She is a Shiba Inu puppy. Her name is Lucy. She's 3 months old as of yesterday, and she is the sweetest, most challenging thing ever. I love her a ton. And she's amazing and smart and frustrating all at the same time. So while we are working today, I am also starting that dog mom life at home.
Yes. And I tell everybody being a dog mom is a little bit harder than being an actual mom. A lot of times I can get babysitters for my children, but you take care of a dog 24/7.
Yeah.
They're always going to need you.
You, Jill, you're my dog babysitter.
Yes.
Okay.
We're trading because I have a little dog too. We got a little puppy in March. His name's Rue, and he's a little cavapoo, and he is adorable. And anyway, so we swap little puppy stories. Luckily, my puppy is out of the puppy phase. Well, almost. He's sleeping through the night and stuff. So we at least have that going for us.
We're getting there.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, well, welcome to the show. Again, we're talking about Britney Spears' conservatorship, and I'm so excited because I think what most people don't recognize is conservatorship is actually pretty prevalent in what we do as family law attorneys. So let me tell you a few different scenarios where we actually do conservatorship. So I do most of you guys know I own one of the first female personal injury firms. And when you get a settlement, an insurance settlement for children, you actually have to file for conservatorships in the court to be able to get those proceeds for the child. So we do conservatorships that way. In our domestic litigation, we also do conservatorships in a few parts. So we do like guardianships / conservatorships for when we are for I guess mentally mentally challenged or people that need help with making their day-to-day decisions. It's a very, very intensive process, which we're going to go through a lot. We also do temporary guardianships for children. And a lot of times that comes to a parent is incapacitated or the parents aren't able to step forward. So we do temporary guardianships or conservatorships for children for whoever is coming forward to do that. Is there something I'm thinking that you've done?
I do. I'm working on one guardianship case right now, and it is similar to what you described. An individual child who is severely autistic who will likely end up living with their parents for maybe the rest of their life, but maybe not. And so their parents are seeking a limited guardianship to protect them now that they're turning 18 to help them kind of move forward in their life and to help them make decisions.
Yes.
And I think that's something that's really important to the Britney case is we've got limited guardianship here on one end of the spectrum, and then we've got this full conservatorship all the way over here on the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
And that's where Britney is.
Which is, in our minds, in our legal minds, is nuts.
Yes.
You don't see that very often. And especially, you do see it in these cases with these children that were born this way or had an accident, and then they clearly have some incapacities that, their parents are going to have to take care of them for the rest of their life. But in, somebody like Britney Spears, where we see on, social media all the time, laughing and dancing, and she's going on these big tours and making millions and millions of dollars, as a legal mind, I'm a little puzzled.
Yes. I mean, she's running, and of course she has people that help her, but she is ultimately the Britney empire. She's the one performing 5 nights a week.
She's the talent.
Yes.
And I just don't understand how a permanent conservatorship makes sense for somebody that it has this capacity to do things like this. So let's talk about, so what is a conservatorship? I know a lot of people are like, I don't understand that. Let's talk about it. So a conservatorship, also known as a guardianship, is a legal mechanism set up for people who are unable to manage their affairs. And a lot of you guys have heard about this with Britney Spears. There's 2 kinds of conservatorships. There can be one over the body, which means that she's incapable of making decisions regarding the safety and well-being of her body. And then there's also the conservatorship over her estate, which means that they would manage her, monies and finances and pay her bills and stuff like that. And so that's the interesting thing about Britney is when we go into it, there can be some logical reasoning for having possibly a conservatorship over her estate, but the conservatorship over her body is what, again, as a legal mind and as a female, somebody that's an entrepreneur and works really hard, I can't understand.
And I think something that's hasn't been necessarily made clear in all of the news reports is that she is not seeking to necessarily abolish the entire conservatorship. She was originally seeking to abolish the conservatorship over the body, and she wanted to retain some of those attorneys to help her manage her estate. I mean, that makes sense, right? She's worth over $60 million. Of course, she wants some individuals to help, with that aspect, but she wants to be in control of that. And she wants to be at the head of that, making those decisions about her estate. And she wants to abolish the conservatorship over her body.
Right. Well, because a conservatorship is usually they're suffering harm as a result of that inability, and they're unable to understand and appreciate the nature and consequence of their inability to manage their affairs. I mean, it's very drastic. We see some very, very handicapped children that are literally incapable of mentally being able to, do things on their own. And it's clear that they're never going to be able to buy a house or go to college, and they're very limited in that, which a conservatorship in that right makes sense. Especially a conservatorship over their body so that the parents can help with medical treatment and, the needs that child has. But to have a permanent conservatorship over your body and in Britney Spears' case just doesn't make sense to us.
I couldn't agree more. And so a lot of what I feel like we're seeing now, I read a few articles about this where she had filed papers with the court 2014, 2016, kind of talking about some of the inappropriate behaviors of her father, talking about, there needs to be some changes in my conservatorship. But she's just now recently speaking out. I mean, and that's why she's in the news. That's why we're here talking about her today. She's had 13 years since this conservatorship entered, which we should point out, it started as just a temporary emergency conservatorship.
Which in our mind, and let's just go right into like the timeline of how did the conservatorship start? Because a temporary conservatorship, if you remember, if we just, don't read the articles, but if you remember back in 2008 when Britney Spears had her, what we would look at on the outside as a mental breakdown. She had just, had these 2 children. She was hounded day in and day out by the paparazzi. I mean, this was back when a paparazzo could get $1 million for one picture of Britney Spears looking crazy.
Yeah.
And it was when, there wasn't, I think some of the laws have even expanded, but also because there wasn't this equipment that could get a good picture, 300 miles. I mean, they wanted to be right in your face.
Yeah.
And she could hear them. And they purposely were taunting her, telling her she was worthless or fat or, these horrible things. And if you remember, I remember, watching the news, and I mean, she would be in her car and they would just be like almost on top of the car. And she went into that gas station and she came out and she shaved her head.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, right, she's going through a divorce.
Yep.
Her husband is saying that she shouldn't have custody of her children. So, I mean, she's going through this intimately personal thing. That's one of the hardest things that people go through in their life in the public eye, with the paparazzi chasing her down into gas stations and at her house at all hours.
And you know what? I mean, as a female, I am going to say Britney Spears had probably postpartum depression. She had undiagnosed anxiety and depression, and nobody was saying she needs help for that. They were all just saying she was crazy.
Yeah. And the media went straight for it. They went straight for crazy. But what's interesting is, after she did shave her head, she checked herself in for that psychiatric watch. She went to the hospital and she was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, which, as someone looking back, hindsight is 2020. Yeah, you can see that. I mean, she was a young starlet. She came to fame, all the pressure. It absolutely makes sense that she was having mental health issues, but there was no treatment before this. And everyone just pegged her as crazy.
Right. And that's what's, you look at the events that happened and I'm like, it's nothing crazier than any other star. I mean, but you don't see, you didn't see like some of these children stars that have gone off the deep end. I mean, I'll just say Miley Cyrus or Justin Bieber. I mean, they've they've had these episodes from being a childhood star, and yet nobody was taking away their God-given freedoms. Because in February 2008, that's when a Los Angeles court had placed Britney Spears and her estate under the temporary control of her father, while she remains under the round-the-clock supervision in a psychiatric hospital. Note, amazing, right? She needed help.
Yeah.
She sought help. And just a psychiatric hospital should never be denoted as this, like, you're crazy. So many healthy, well-minded people have to seek psychiatric care at one point or another. And a psychiatric hospital does 2 things. First of all, it allows you to sleep. I don't know if people know, but one of the biggest reasons why people have psychiatric breakdowns is because of lack of sleep. The most healthy person and the most well-minded person can have a psychiatric breakdown when they don't sleep. I would imagine this is what's happening. So a psychiatric hospital can just sleep. And a lot of times 3 days in that hospital, you slept and you're a whole different person. You're back to your own, your own state of mind.
Well, and it was believed that she had gone 5 days before that without sleeping.
Yeah.
Actually, that's been reported that the 5 days prior to checking into that psychiatric hospital, she hadn't slept.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And then the second thing about a psychiatric hospital is it gives you round the clock ability for doctors to look at you to decide what medication could help you. And it's a really intimate ability to do that, because a lot of times if you don't go into a hospital, you have to go to a psychiatrist. They see you once, maybe for an hour. They have to do it, and then you kind of monitor your symptoms. Whereas when you go into one of these psychiatric hospitals, the other thing is she had money. So she was able to go to one of the best centers in the country. I mean, this is where celebrities and children of celebrities go to really get help. And so she was being taken care of.
Yes.
And that's what we wanted, right?
Yep.
So that was in February 2008. Now, Jamie Spears then petitioned for the emergency temporary conservatorship and was given, and he was given control over his daughter's financial assets, including her Hollywood home and credit cards. Now, it's very, very common in conservatorships for a family member to be appointed as that conservator. Makes sense. They're the ones closest to you. But what we're going to probably get into a little bit is the conflict of interest now that Jamie Spears has with being her conservator. And so back then, a temporary conservatorship, dad was appointed again as a legal mind. I'm sure you can agree, Corttany, doesn't
makes sense.
Any flags.
First people you would look to, mom and dad. In typical guardianships, conservatorships, the like. You look to mom and dad as long as they're, of mind and capacity to take on the role of the conservatorship. And if not, maybe you look to a sibling, depending on age or if there's some type of incapacity in a parent. Right. But it's the first person you look to.
Right. So this is where it gets a little bit gray. And we don't necessarily know why this happened. So a temporary guardianship in Utah could actually be pretty permanent, meaning it can go on for several years until that person asks for the temporary guardianship.
They need to challenge it or object to it or make some motion to the court.
And in fact, the person that's under the conservatorship, once they petition the conservatorship to end, it ends. It actually, the burden flips to the conservator or the person who wants conservatorship to then tell the court why they believe the conservatorship needs to go forward. So it's not on the burden of the person that's under the temporary guardianship. So what we are a little, again, as legal minds, like what just happened is in October of 2008, Judge Goetz ruled that the conservatorship would be made permanent. And at the time of the hearing, the conservatorship is necessary and appropriate for the complexity of financial and business entities and Britney being susceptible to undue influence. That was a direct quote from the judge. And what we don't know is what happened to get to that permanent guardianship. So two paths could have happened. One, she could have stipulated to it.
She could have said, I have no objection to this temporary emergency conservatorship turning into a permanent conservatorship with, X, Y, and Z, my dad appointed, or this firm, etc.
And a little of us are thinking, well, she was in this very, very fragile state of mind. Again, at the time, she believed her dad had her best interest. So part of me is like, she probably just said that. She's like, I don't want to deal with it. My dad will make sure I'm taken care of. Not even being mentally capable of recognizing the consequences of that. Now, a couple of things you need to know. To get a conservatorship, there had to be an attorney that was appointed to speak and on behalf of Britney, which means that attorney's whole job was to make sure that whatever the judge did, that the best interests of Britney's were sought after. And one of those things that they have to do is they get psychological evaluations, they get doctors to come in. But at the end of the day, if there's a trial or there's a hearing on the conservatorship, there has to be an attorney for Britney. We haven't heard from that attorney.
No, we haven't. And we know that attorney was appointed at the time. We know that, she no longer has that same attorney now. And she's given the opportunity to pick her attorney now. But we don't know, was that an attorney she chose? Was that an attorney her father chose? Or was that an attorney the court appointed?
In our understanding, the court should appoint it, but attorneys can stipulate to the attorney.
Yep, they can choose someone.
So again, these are all, and the documents are sealed, and a little bit of, I have done everything to research this to find out why.
Yes, trying to get the unsealed court documents. New York Times got their hands on some of them,
yeah,
but it's still very sealed. And I mean, we can talk about why you seal documents and when documents should be sealed in a whole podcast about that. But it does leave the rest of us who are trying to provide commentary or trying to talk about this with some holes.
And so that could have been, she could have stipulated to it. The second approach that the court could have then granted this permanent guardianship or conservatorship is they had a trial or they had a hearing and they presented evidence. Her dad presented evidence to why the conservatorship needed to be made permanent. And the judge made that finding that the conservatorship is necessary and appropriate for the complexity of financial and business entities and being susceptible to undue influence. So just so you know, Jamie, her dad, was named the conservator over her person, and Andrew Wallet was assigned to be the co-conservator of the estate to help Britney's dad manage all of her financial affairs. Obviously, she was worth a lot of money back then. She, was a business within a business. I mean, so I would assume that appointing somebody like Andrew Wallet was really just like almost like a financial strategist to help them ensure that her monies were protected.
It's similar to putting your money in a trust and having a trustee control those finances. That's very popular among the uber wealthy celebrity culture.
Right. But Jamie being appointed as the conservator over her person was what really I am frustrated with. Because again, we have this girl that's going through some kind of mental health crisis. Just a statistic to throw out there. I mean, I think it's 30 million Americans that suffer with depression and anxiety. So for him to get conservatorship over the person based off of a mental crisis is concerning.
Yes. I mean, and why aren't there limits on it? Why is it forever? I mean, she was having a mental health crisis. It's 13 years later. We look at her now. We see what her business has grown to. We see how many performances she does a year. I mean, she's been on tour consistently the last few years. She headlined in Vegas. She is running her empire.
She's made a lot of money in the last 10 years since the conservatorship went, and she is, doing it.
Yeah.
She might not be what everybody wants her to be.
She doesn't have to be.
She became famous at such a young age, and we can talk all about, what fame does to children and the effects it has on them all day. That could be a fun another podcast. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're then incapable of making decisions. I mean, getting married again. I did find this. Actually, maybe you found this, but TMZ did report that Spears' lawyers suggested making the conservatorship permanent. They quoted an unnamed source close to Spears, but they basically said that this could boost the singer's chance of regaining custody of her sons, Sean Preston, who was 3 at the time, and Jaden James, 2 in the future. And if that was really like a thought process of her attorney, I mean, I just want to do a little slap in the face.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that, because I read this and I thought to myself, why would giving up the rights to have control over her body, finances, everything, help her get custody? What's going to help her get custody is actually exactly what she did. Continue to see your doctors, take your prescribed medications, and get back out there living, working, and leading a fulfilling life.
Right. And the thing is she could have done it under a temporary guardianship, conservatorship. She could have just kept it temporary. She could have done that for 4 or 5 years until she really felt like she was on her feet and she was doing this. And then it would have been a much easier process. But that's one of the things that why I'm just like in my brain, I'm like, first of all, these are California attorneys. They're probably some of the most expensive attorneys out there because Britney Spears can pay for it, which we're going to get to the conflict of interest in a minute. So why was that their strategy when everything we're learning about California conservatorship, and I want everybody to hear this. I'm not licensed in California. I've never gone to school there. I've never taken the bar there, and I'm not licensed to practice law. I'm just reading this information. But if we took this to Utah and we had a permanent conservatorship here, it is hard.
Yes.
To unwind. It is hard to change. And I just don't understand why an attorney would think that a permanent conservatorship over her body and estate. Now, even splitting it, where a temporary conservatorship over her body and then a permanent conservatorship over her financials, even I could wrap my head around that.
I could, especially when it comes to, she had also had some incidents just earlier that year. She had become suicidal in her home with the children, and the police were called. And so I understand that her attorneys were worried about the court finding that she was a potential danger to her children. But as practicing family law attorneys, and I will say also, I am only a family law attorney here in Utah. But in my experience here under Utah laws, the court's looking at, are you a harm to your children right now?
Right.
But what about 3 months from now? What
Right.
about 6 months from now?
Right.
Once you have gone into the hospital, once you have gotten, some maintenance, some just getting a little bit more control and making sure there's no reason to take away that God-given right to parent her children.
Right. And even in Utah, I mean, we have a specific statute that says that if you are getting treatment, if you are doing what's needed to make sure that your mental illness is, I guess, in check, they cannot use that against you as a best interest factor for determining if you can see or cannot see your children. I mean, like you said, it's a God-given right to parent. And the courts are always working toward unification, whether it's, a slow out or something quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just don't understand the lawyering behind this decision. And we did find a quote. You found a quote from People magazine that basically said that Spears' attorneys, and I think we're going to get more information about this in the future because they're going to have to protect their butt, I think, is that they requested that she not object to the permanent conservatorship.
Yep, that Britney requested her attorney not object. And so that takes us back to, was she in a fragile place? And her dad said, look, I'm going to take care of you, honey. And she just said, okay, I trust you.
Right.
You're my dad.
Right.
Was it something more sinister? I don't know. I mean,
and honestly, it shouldn't have been Britney's decision. Even if Britney said, I don't want you to object to it, that's not her decision. She's literally been found to be unable to make decisions. That should have come from her attorney that was representing her. Oh. And her attorney should have been like, you're saying that now, but these are the effects of this. And this is why we need to, at least for the record, show that, this isn't something we want.
Well, and at least that attorney has an obligation to do some sort of independent investigation, to look through the medical charts, to maybe even talk to the doctors. They needed to come into that courtroom and give the court an opinion, not my client said so. Right. So that's what I'm going to do.
It should have never been that way. I mean, I want you guys to understand, a conservatorship means that the court is taking away the civil liberties from one person and giving them to someone else. So it's the court weighing into the person's life and saying you, as a person with a disability, are no longer able to make decisions about yourself and livelihood, such as where you live and how you support and feed yourself. And we are putting someone else in charge of making those decisions. Mm-hmm. I mean, the gravity of that and what the decision for them to do that permanent guardianship was just absolutely, in my mind, asinine. It shouldn't have happened.
I agree. It shouldn't have happened back then. I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. So I will say what's important is that she's speaking up now. So let's talk about, just that bombshell of testimony that she gave. I think that as much as people are like, I don't really understand the legal consequences of all of this, they heard her. That testimony got leaked and they saw her and they heard her and they said, I'm not an attorney. This isn't necessarily my wheelhouse, but this is wrong.
Yeah. Because conservatorships are often used for people who have a severe cognitive impairment. Often these people are older, such as those with severe dementia. Guardianships are also appointed for people with significant development disabilities. Spears is 39. She's not the typical person under a conservatorship. She's a famous pop star since her teens. She spent the past 13 years releasing albums, judging the X Factor, and making an estimated $138 million performing in Las Vegas. And I mean, when you look at it, again, from a legal mind, it just doesn't make sense. And I'm free team, free Britney. Like, she needs to get out of this, and there needs to be a direction for her to go. Now, I think that we've seen some really good movement.
We have seen some movement. So she came into court. She was allowed to testify. And a few things have happened since then, right? Her own attorney has withdrawn from her case, and she's gotten the ability to hire an attorney who she wants. I believe she hired another ex-prosecutor.
Right. Which, by the way, if Britney ever is listening to this, I just want you to know that you should get powerful women behind you on your team. I think that you do struggle with a little bit of trust issues, and I have seen the person that you've hired, and I'm excited for you because he sounds smart and capable. But I also want you to remember, like, there's women out here who understand the law, who would love to make sure that you trust and are encouraged, and don't forget about that. And now that you have the opportunity to find your own counsel, make sure you really do your due diligence in finding who you trust.
Absolutely, because there are plenty of attorneys out there who are extremely competent, but she needs someone who can be empathetic to her situation and someone who can help her unwind the years of inaction that have happened.
And not just going to spend $1 million on legal fees because they can. I think that the bombshell, like you talked about, was that big, her open testimony, that the court allowed it to be open. It was a phone call. She wasn't in court with the court, which makes sense because of COVID. And the whole world heard it.
Yes.
A couple of things she said in that is, I shouldn't be in a conservatorship if I can work and provide money and work for myself and pay other people. I'm telling you, that was the smartest thing she said, because as an attorney, I was like, exactly.
That's exactly where I would have gone. I would have looked at her earnings, her concert schedules, her, all the work that she's doing, and to say, look, court, how can you find that this is still necessary?
Right. And you have to remember, like, conservatorships are taking care, like, saying that they're incapable of making any decisions. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. Britney Spears is going to be able to make the decision. She doesn't need a live-in nurse or anybody. I mean, she is able to get up in the morning, remember to eat, remember to exercise. She talks a lot about that, dancing. She loves to dance. I mean, she makes these decisions on a day-to-day basis. And it was heartbreaking when one of the things she testified to is, I was told I couldn't get my hair done or my nails done because it wasn't safe. And then yet her maids were coming in and cleaning her house and have their nails and hair done. And that's just one of those things where I'm like, that's exactly right. Like, why are they putting these limitations on Britney? She doesn't need that.
And some of them don't even make sense. I mean, to get your hair done isn't safe. Explain that to me.
You could have any Hollywood hairdresser would come to her home. Yeah. And do her nails. She would never have to leave her home. In fact, it sounded like pretty much kept at home for the last year and a half because of COVID. And she was only able to leave to go to counseling, which was very, very traumatic for her because her counselor was in a very, very public place where the paparazzi was always there and taking pictures of her. And she would go in and she would try to talk to the counselor, and she'd come out and she'd look the way she looked. And they were just taking advantage of it.
And they kept posting, they'd post the pictures like, yes, she went into counseling. Oh, did she cry? Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Right?
And why is it your business? Why? She's been going to counseling for 11 years, guys. She's been taking medication. She's been going to these psychiatrists who she pointed out, that one of them she felt very abused by. I mean, I think the truth's going to come out. And
I think a lot of these decisions that you would normally, right, they took away her ability to make decisions. So as anyone else in the world, if you go into counseling and you say, I like this counselor, but I don't feel heard here. I'd like to find someone new. You just go and find someone new. Britney doesn't get that.
Right.
She gets who is chosen for her. She doesn't even get to drive herself to her appointments. They took away her driver's license as well as a part of this.
Right. And she's able to drive just this last week. That happened in the latest hearing. The judge did grant that, but it was because the conservators finally said you can drive. I mean, it wasn't until I think Britney Spears said, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to tell you where I'm at and where I've been treated, that finally her conservators are like, oh. The other thing is so we're going to talk a little bit about just like ending this guardianship, this conservatorship. I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, she's got to file a petition with the court. She pled for the court in that hearing that was open to the public. She pled to the court to be able to end it without assessment. And again, as a legal mind, I'm like, I don't think you're going to get that, Britney.
No, I think she's going to have to go and get another assessment done. And what I really hope, so often when there's a burden placed on one party or the other, the court, they come in and they say, Britney, you've petitioned to end this guardianship. And so the burden is on your dad to show why it's still necessary. But I really, really hope the court actually follows the law on that and doesn't put the burden on Britney to show why it's not necessary.
And I think they are going to. And one of the problems is that she's probably had several psychiatric, and she probably is on the spectrum of whatever. We've never actually, I think,
they haven't
known
really
about her diagnosis
divulged other than depression and anxiety. So we can only speculate as to what those psychiatric reports will reveal. But at the end of the day, as an attorney, I just don't think she's going to get out of it unless she submits it.
Yeah. And if I was her attorney right now, the new one that she just got, I would be finding our own personal assessor, somebody that we trust, that, there's assessors out there all the time that do these kind of assessments. I'd be finding who I want, pay them. I would be as my own private witness, and they would assess, and then we deal with the recommendations from there. Because I think this is going to have to be a big, long trial. So let's talk a little bit about this, because one of the things that's frustrated me about this is Jamie Spears.
Yes, her sister.
No, Jamie is her dad.
Oh, sorry. I mean, Jamie Lynn, her sister, Jamie, her dad.
Yeah. Her sister.
We could go into a whole thing about her sister, so sorry.
Yeah, I get that. But her dad, I think we all have good intentions as being a good parent. And so I think at the beginning, his conservatorship was with good intentions to really help Britney. I, as a personal opinion, do not believe his intentions are so clear now.
I agree. I tend to agree with you. I mean, I want to believe that he was just like any other dad who saw his daughter going through hell and said to himself, like, what can I do to help her? What can I do to make sure that my little girl is here through Christmas this year, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I want to think was going through his mind. Then he got some control, and then he got a lot of money.
A lot of money. I think that everybody needs to hear this. Like, he's getting paid over $200,000 a year just for being the conservator.
Well, and the conservator, her estate pays all of his legal fees.
All of it. She just had to pay a $90,000 bill. Did you hear this? Because of the defense against this last court hearing. And a lot of it was media control, because they wanted to control the media spin on, and Britney has to pay for this. So when we're talking about conflict of interest, Jamie doesn't have to pay for an attorney. He gets to use all her money to fight, so he could spend millions.
Yes, as much as he wants, and he doesn't pay a dime of it.
Right.
She pays it.
So now that she gets to hire her own attorney, she has to pay for her attorney. And then her dad controls all the decisions regarding any of the experts and stuff. And so, again, another conflict, because they're, how much is he paying them? Mm-hmm. I don't want to say people, especially in the professional world, mental health world, are being bought off. But in this when you're talking about this kind of money,
I don't think it's too far outside the realm of what's possible.
Yes. And, and then if Jamie really loved his daughter and was really now looking out, why would he not stipulate to loosen the conservatorship or the guardianship, give her some rights back?
Make some changes. Let her have a baby if she wants to have a baby.
Or get married. Or allow her to drive in the car with her boyfriend. I mean, there are so many restrictive controls over this. Let her pick her own therapist, So that's one way. The other thing I'm like is if Jamie really loved, because as you should know, her conservatorship over her estate has changed. A year and a half ago, that's when finally her attorney was like, I'm going to petition the court to change conservatorship over her estate and to make co-conservatorships. And that was a big, long process. Jamie fought that.
Absolutely. That paperwork, I believe, started in 2016.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it wrong, but I looked through the court records and the little bit that's been provided.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 years. But you have to admit, now that she's finally been able to speak out, a lot of those attorneys are dropping like flies because they recognize the conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Everyone except her dad.
Yeah. And so her dad fought that tooth and nail. He is now, there's no sign from him that he is wanting to step out, which in my mind, I'm like, man, if you really loved your daughter, if you knew that she felt this way about you, why would you just not step aside? You could get her. She's talked about her mom. So one of the things I thought was interesting about Britney Spears is, her parents divorced in like 2002, but then they got back together, and I didn't know this. So they got back together, and actually her mom, what's her name? Dana? I don't know. Lynn? Jamie Lynn? That would be, is it really?
Well, because that's where Jamie Lynn came from, is Jamie and Lynn, but I believe Lynn might be her middle name. Anyways. I digress.
Seriously. But so they actually got back together and they lived together, and then they didn't actually split up until about 2 years after this whole incident. Mm-hmm. And again, it was hush, but a lot of it, I think, came under the scrutiny of when they divorced. Jamie was already in control. He was her manager anyways. Mm-hmm. And so mom was losing all that financial stability because Jamie had all the control anyways. And then in 2008, her dad actually got like actual control. And I think that scared her as well. And that's the interesting thing is like her mom, doesn't have any access to anything. And so that's just been something like, there's 3 ways that Britney can get out of the conservatorship. Obviously she can do a trial. She can file a petition to get rid of it. She's going to have to probably get evaluated again. The court's going to have to rule, hey, you are capable of making these decisions. And my thing is like celebrities make dumb decisions every day.
Well, it's not typically anyone's place to come in and, when Justin Bieber was getting arrested and, doing all of that craziness 2 years ago.
As a 16-year-old.
No one came in and said, you know what, we're going to take your rights away. They allowed him to grow up. And I believe just recently he's married. He's saying, you know what, I made a lot of mistakes. Right. I acted really dumb, or I wasted a lot of my money, et cetera, et cetera. And a little bit of it that factors in it for me is it because she was a young woman as opposed to a young man? Was it this exerted control of her father? Yeah. Did the court look at her differently?
Oh, I absolutely think that. I think she was scrutinized at a whole different level because she was a woman. Because another thing that I thought was interesting too is that she it is just so Demi Lovato is who comes to mind. Mm-hmm. She's struggled with drugs, like hardcore drugs, since she was under 18. She's had relapse after relapse, and then just 2 years ago she literally died. Narcan saved her. Luckily somebody had it, and she was able to, they revived. And I look at her and she's out here now making music and being an advocate for other girls.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's in control of her mind and body. And I'm like, what's the difference? What's the standard now? And I just think Britney just was in the wrong place, wrong time. And a lot of people made money off of her weaknesses. And in fact, a lot of people are making money off of her weaknesses today.
And they don't want to lose that money, right?
No. Her dad would have to actually go get a job. I don't think he's had a real job since probably 1999 when his daughter came out with Baby Hit Me One More Time.
Well, and that's another thing, right? If we're going to try to get into this mind, right now he's got all the control. Right now he's able to pay himself. He's able to continue it. And we say to ourselves, why doesn't he just loosen some restrictions? maybe because he knows that he's burned those bridges with his daughter, because she's not going to forgive him, at least for a very long time.
And shoulda, woulda, coulda. Maybe he's on like some like path of like redemption, like maybe, but I absolutely think that the parents should take a little accountability for where their daughter came. And when Britney Spears came out, she went from Disney Club to literally singing Baby Hit Me One More Time in like an absolute nothing outfit. The parents could have had a little bit more of a say in protecting their daughter to ensure that she wasn't going to be scrutinized and sexualized the way she was. But they made it okay. And now it's like her dad's like, well, because I screwed my kid up back in the day, that now I'm going to have control over her forever. I mean, it's absolutely. And I, as a Britney fan, I saw her Las Vegas show. I absolutely loved it. I grew up in the Britneys. I mean, Britney and I are exact same age. It pains me to think that she'll never perform again if her dad stays in this process.
Well, and a lot of what she's been saying just this past week is, I'm done. I am done performing. I am done working. And my whole self is going to be devoted to getting my life back, to getting my rights back.
And she deserves that.
She does absolutely deserve that. And so as a fan, yes, I would love to go see Britney in Vegas. I would love to see her perform again. But at the same time, absolutely. Like, make this decision to put your life into this.
Have a kid. She's been with her boyfriend for years. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just what they're doing to her makes no sense. And I'm just grateful that this Free Britney movement came out. The documentary that was on that came out to kind of shine light, and then just what's recently. So we're going to continually monitor this. I am all for Team Britney. Like, girl, you go get it. You deserve it. You are such a joy to so many people who find solace in knowing that you are fighting through some of the worst. And people look up to you. People know that if you can handle this, if you can be positive every day, which she does, she really tries to post positive stuff. I love lately, she's been like giving everybody the finger. Like, this is what I think about my naysayers. This is what I think about the people that are doing this to me. But she is really standing up for positivity. I'm proud of her.
I am too. And I just hope she continues to fight. And I hope this isn't 15 minutes in the media, because the more and more it's behind closed doors, the less likely we are to see a major change and to see people get held accountable here.
And you know what? This judge is going to be very, very careful about it. She's very smart. I've seen her. I've heard about her. She is going to be very deliberate. That's why she let that phone conference go public. Mm-hmm. The judge could have said no. But she did that purposely because she knows that Britney Spears deserves a voice. Go get it, girl. Thanks, Corttany, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, another episode of No One Dies from Divorce. Remember, my book is for sale right now. It's on Amazon. Go get a copy. You guys, my book is also in Barnes & Noble, local Targets. You can go find me here in Utah, local bookstores, online, Barnes & Noble, Target, and then Amazon. And remember, if you're loving these podcasts, to go ahead and subscribe, and give me a 5-star rating, because that means that we're going to continually bringing the best content for you and for your entertainment. Thanks, guys. Till next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, follow, and share. I'd love to hear your questions and feedback. You can contact me at community@jillcoil.com. See you next time. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Any advice given on the podcast is general and shall not be construed as legal advice.